Carrie has had the good fortune, if you will, of working with Goods Professional Services Organization and many of our customers to actually help them craft custom-built BYOD policies. And it turns out, as Carrie's fond of saying, a policy is much, much more than a fill-in-the-blanks kind of document. In fact, that's almost the least of it. And so Carrie's going to walk us through what some of those steps are in order to actually construct a policy that's going to work not just for, say, your legal department or your HR department, but work for the users, work for the employees. And done right, it accomplishes everybody's objectives. But there's probably some things in here that perhaps you haven't considered, and so we'll walk through those, and then we'll have a little bit of discussion with our panel members. So with that, let me hand it over to Carrie.
Great. Thank you, John. And it has been a good fortune and some of the most fun I've ever had working with IT teams, working with legal, HR, finance, employee communications to put together BYOD programs. I think everybody knows already BYOD is mainstream, but we often find customers who find the policy creation a bit tricky. But just to level set, or just to describe the landscape that we're all living in, 80% of the folks surveyed are considering a BYOD program. But 67% didn't have a policy or weren't sure if they had a policy or not. And meanwhile, 45% reported that they had legal issues that were delaying their BYOD policy construction or delaying their BYOD rollout. I'm fond of saying or calling out, this is a cross-functional effort. BYOD, the policy puzzle, it traverses many functional teams within an organization, within an enterprise. IT is typically in a position where it's rolling out technology to users. But in this case, for BYOD, there are a lot of stakeholders who own and who have a vested interest and who own the problem of managing risk for the company. And the first thing that I suggest as a best practice is to have clarity around your objectives for adopting BYOD. There's a big spectrum of why people are doing BYOD, starting off with the one that we're probably all familiar with here, which is to increase employee productivity in the new mobile world. The second one is to reduce or avoid costs and to improve your TCO and to improve the ROI on your mobility investment. And there's a third vector to this discussion which has to do, and we see this very often, and Sarah's going to tell us a lot more about, an HR-sponsored program around employee enablement and about employee engagement. Most companies have a hybrid of all three of those main objectives, but it's useful as you're embarking on a BYOD policy project or a BYOD rollout project to know which one is the most important driver, or to at least have a conversation around which are the most important justifications for why you're doing that. That kind of clarity is really important and helps frame the rest of the discussion and the rest of, and can shape many of the downstream decisions that you'll be making along the way. When we engage with customers on a BYOD policy construction project, we typically do this in 4 phases. We get a cross-functional team organized, legal, HR, finance, employee communications, privacy, security, sometimes purchasing. We always want to get an employee communications person involved to help us do the communication, the announcements, to help with end-user enablement activities, whether those are events, training sessions, and so forth, and to get them all grounded in what we at Good think is the most elegant solution possible for BYOD, which is a secure container model that completely partitions personal data and personal matter, personal content as or personal matter as the lawyers would call it, from corporate data, and makes real the trade-off and the balancing act of competing interests. Enterprises have an absolute requirement for controlling corporate data and corporate IP, and employees have an expectation that their privacy will be protected or at least not breached. No one as an employee wants their employer looking at their photographs or pawing through their music collection and making judgments about their taste in music, or tracking them through geolocation, or doing anything else that's intrusive for the personal use of your personal asset. So what I found very useful is to make sure that the legal teams, the finance teams, who were not fluid in the technology like we are, make sure that they understand that, and then invite them to be part of your pilot. Let them use it and get their feedback from it, and that obstacle of not understanding the technology and how the secure container works and how the partitioning works, that'll help you overcome that. Next, we do some discovery and data analysis. We want to look at what is your end user agreement that you have in place. Do you have a mobility policy? Do you have a laptop policy that we can use as the framework or the basis for creating a BYOD policy? So that the BYOD is a derivative of what's probably already in place as your laptop or mobility policy. We also survey employees, and we survey a pretty good sample of your employees to find out how many people who are using corporate libel smartphones or other devices, how many have smartphones that are personally owned. That's a very useful data point for you to know as you plan a rollout. And what we find after having surveyed thousands of corporate libel users is about 70% already have smartphones. Next, we want to find out what kind of data plans they have. If they're all unlimited plans, or all have 5 or 10 gig plans, that would shorten the conversation we might have about a stipend, because they're already paying for an all-you-can-eat plan, and so there's not going to be any incremental cost to using their personal devices for corporate use. We want to find out what carriers they're using, and we want to test whether they're interested in participating in this, and if not, why. And we want them to express their concerns. We all know, I think, just empirically, that most employees are concerned about privacy, but there's nothing like hearing it from your own users' voices to let you know what their concerns are, and those concerns can be addressed through communications, through announcements, by embedding those mitigations to those concerns in the policy itself. We collect the team into a workshop environment, kick this off, and then typically what happens is I draft the policy based on some decisions that we've made along the way around who's going to be eligible, which devices, will there be a stipend or not, and how will that be paid? What are the password requirements? What are the wipe conditions? And how are you going to enforce policy, and what are the enrollment processes going to look like? Who's going to be eligible? How do they qualify? What kind of approvals do they need? Then I typically draft the policy, circulate it to the cross-functional team for review, take those comments and improve that draft, and then the project culminates in a workshop where we gather that whole team together face-to-face in a conference room, and we go through the policy document. Sometimes page by page, sometimes paragraph by paragraph, sometimes line by line, until everyone agrees on the exact wording and the spirit of the agreement. And at that point, we have consensus among those stakeholders, and we know that that policy then is ready for executive ratification, and that the project is ready to get launched. The deliverables we typically produce are the policy document, a standalone employee participation agreement that the employee signs to acknowledge the trade-offs. I will safeguard corporate data. You won't look at my photographs. We define the eligibility. We define what the enrollment process is, as I mentioned before, how we're going to enforce it, what the reimbursement approach is, and how that's going to be paid, if it's going to be paid, and come up with a communication plan to start making announcements about the program, making sure that there's clarity among the organization about who's eligible, how to enroll, what kind of approval, where do you go next, where do you get more information. And so with that, I will turn it back to John.
All right. So let me just do a quick show of hands. How many people here are working for an organization that has a BYOD program? Okay, so it looks like what, about half to 60%? Of you, how many actually have a written BYOD policy in place that your users have to acknowledge? Not everyone. Okay. All right. So let's talk about this a little bit. Now, in terms of industries, I know that you have various regulatory concerns that concern both PII, personally identifiable information of your employee base, as well as just the sensitivity of your business information, whether that's competitive threat pressure or whether it's, again, regulatory and moving markets by inappropriate disclosure. I believe most, if not all of you, had existing mobile programs for some time that were corporate-owned, pretty tightly controlled. Is that fair?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So I think it would be interesting to find out, what was your original motivation for going down the path to enable a Bring Your Own Device program? I'll start with you, Sarah.
Okay. So Barclays, as you know, huge global bank. We have 140,000 employees over 21 countries. And when we had a new chief exec in place 2 years ago, Anthony Jenkins, and he created 5 key values. Because we'd had a rough time, we lost a lot of confidence from our customers. We had the whole LIBOR scandal. And just to, I think, Mike's point earlier about your people embracing digital, we wanted our people to feel part of the whole digital revolution. We wanted people to be able to access things quickly in their own time, to be transparent as well, and give them information that we wouldn't generally have given in such a quick and speedy way, similar to how we serve our customers. Sure. And if customers want to do their banking overnight and have things done quickly but very safely, then we needed to empower our people to do the same. So we have, in terms of eligibility for email and being able to download good, we have about 30,000 good downloads, which has been great, and obviously the security that we needed is there. But 80% of our employees use their own devices to access internal systems for Barclays. So they can blog while they're at home, they can view their payslip. We've got geolocation ability, so because 20% of the workforce work independent locations, so at home, they can link up with colleagues who are close by if they want to meet for coffee or have a meeting. So technology and having that mobility has just been really key for us to live by the values that we've put in place.
So in short, it was as much about employee satisfaction, empowerment, as it was about straight productivity.
Absolutely. I mean, the ROI, it's hard to give you some definitive figures right now because it will take years before we really see the true engagement figures. But in creating that trust and people feeling empowered, we're already seeing huge improvements in our employee engagement surveys. People are happier that they can blog unfiltered, and it's the key way that we fix our operational glitches is by people blogging in to say, look, we could do this a much better way. Stewardship is one of our key values. So we have a program called See It, Own It, Fix It. So if you see something that you could do better for a customer or some process that could be easier, you blog it in, and that's how we change it.
So it's as much about a cultural change for the corporation as it is about mobile itself.
Yeah, it's the digital revolution for us.
Jim, how about you?
So our journey actually started about 2009. And for me, it was all about choice. The iPhone had been out for almost 2 years at that time. And prior to this, our motto was you could have any mobile device you want as long as it's a BlackBerry. And we started getting people coming in and saying, hey, I'd like to use an iPhone. And it's like, sorry, you can't do that. And we started just having a look at it as, well, what if we gave people choice to use what works for them? And along the way, we also realized it would save us a lot of money. Because when we did the corporate-owned BlackBerry device, we were replacing probably 3 to 5 a week because, Sarah lost it, someone stole it, their dog ate it, they ran it over. And when you replace a BlackBerry off contract, it's expensive. We've been running now the BYOD program for a little over 3 years. And in 3 years, we still own about 6% of our devices are still corporate-owned. But of that, we've replaced, I think, 5 at our expense in the past 3 years. So just on the devices alone, we've saved a ton of money. Although I get full disclosure, our stipend is way too generous. We give our employees a stipend.
Analysts say stipends will eventually go away.
I tried to kill the stipend this year. I was unsuccessful.
So financial motivation was actually, I mean, sounds like a pretty big motivator.
Well, actually, the financial for me, frankly, was an afterthought. It was really about letting people use the device that works for them. You know, I jokingly tell people, and Carrie heard me say it this morning, you know, if my people want to use the, no offense to the people in the audience, but if they want to use the tiny little screen on the iPhone, God bless them. If they want to use a larger screen on a Samsung, you know, knock yourself out. And if you want to use the far superior Windows product, what I use, you know, then good for it. You use what works for you, but that's what it's really about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and certainly, I mean, that's one of the great things when people are able to choose a platform that, you know, makes them feel good. They like the interface. They're productive on it. That's got to translate to a more productive employee.
It does make, I think, for a more productive employee. It gives them a little bit of sense of ownership of what they've got, and they've got a stake in the game of what it's about. You know, somebody made the comment during the last session about the, you know, what's different. You know, what's really changed. We've seen the movie before, and I think what's different this time around is it's no longer IT imposing upon the user as to what technology they're going to use. The users are coming to us and saying, you know, this is it, this is what I want to use. And if that's what makes them productive, if that's what makes them happy, you know what? If I can do it safely and securely, why not?
All right, Robbie, how about you?
Well, there's several factors. There were some of the driving factors we have not just our employees, but the people we work with, whether it's on the outsourced services side or contractors who work with us or engineering firms that we work with. And so these are all part of our work environment, and we wanted to find a better way of harnessing everything together. At the same time, we were getting more millennials and other people coming in who didn't like the BlackBerries that we had and were carrying 2 phones at the very least. So as in my previous session, the analogy was like 2 landscape gardeners arguing about plate tectonics. It was going to happen. So the idea was, how do we facilitate its happening? Some of the remainder of the consideration was really productivity, saying because hardly a fourth of our company had company-owned cell phones. And what we wanted to do was to allow anyone who is eligible, being a non-hourly employee, to have access anywhere, anytime with any device, starting with a smartphone and a tablet. We haven't moved to computing devices yet. So that was the main consideration. The CEO said, fine, okay, we can do it, but stay cost neutral. So the cost consideration was also there. We ended up taking a rather strict policy in saying, only people who are customer-facing will have company-owned phones with company-owned numbers, and everybody else is on the BYOD program. So I have never seen an IT policy that had so much emotion attached to it, positive or negative, as I have in this one. And so my conclusion has been that policy, BYOD policy, is very, very small portion of it is really IT policy. The rest of it is finance. It's who pays, who owns the device, what stipend is there, privacy considerations, and then for us being a global company, huge implications on the regulatory side, where you have certain geographies in Europe that shall remain nameless. They were on the other side of the Armada. Make you know, use it as a revenue opportunity, privacy issues. So we've rolled out our BYOD program in North America. We're still trying to figure out and make sure that our Europe policies with safe harbor and the new model clauses are in place before we can go there.